Under the scorched lavender skies of Vorak 9, two armies watched from opposite cliffs, neither blinking, neither breathing, each species unwilling to be the first to flinch. The rocks beneath their boots were jagged with mineral spikes, and sulfur gusts rolled in like breath from a sleeping beast. Even the wind on this world was hostile, laced with microscopic acid that sizzled softly on exposed metal. In the basin below, marked by ancient combat sigils carved deep into obsidian stone, the field of ritual combat waited. The duel had been demanded by the Voraki Empire, a towering species of engineered war beasts who valued brute strength, blood rights, and ancestral growls. Their general, Clorg son of Krog, paced slowly across the blackened field, each step cracking stone, steam rising from his nostrils with every snort. His armor was minimal, more for show than protection, showcasing muscles corded with engineered power. 1,000 scars told 1,000 victories. Hovering high above, from observation decks set in diplomatic warships, the galaxy's most arrogant empires watched, smug in their assumption that the outcome was already known. And then, at the far end of the combat field, the human arrived. He did not arrive in a transport pod or grand war chariot. No thunderous fanfare. No painted banners. Just a man. Tall, lean, sleeves rolled up, boots dusty. He walked like someone who'd just been disturbed from a long lunch and was only half interested in what came next. Marshal Elias Harper, a general of Earth, though he wore no insignia, no gleaming armor, no enhancements visible to the alien eye. His only visible equipment was a worn-out belt with a standard-issue water canteen, a pack of chewing gum tucked into the sleeve of his jacket, and a pair of eyes that flicked across the terrain like a hawk watching for subtle shifts in the wind. From the Voraki ship, a diplomat with 6 eyes narrowed all of them in disbelief. "Is that the human champion?" he muttered. A smaller alien beside him chirped in confusion. "Where is his exoframe? Or his plasma claws?" The ambassador of the Keru species made a choking sound that might have been a laugh. They sent an underfed civilian. Below, Harper stretched once. His spine popped. He took one step forward onto the combat field, then stood perfectly still. Clorg bellowed, lifting his arms to the sky. A ceremonial challenge. His claws glinted under the violet sunlight, saliva dripping from jagged teeth. He began to circle, pawing the earth, marking territory like the apex predator he was engineered to be. Harper didn't react. Not a twitch. Not a blink. The alien commentators murmured in 26 languages, all variations of the same thought. What is the human doing? 10 minutes passed. Clorg had roared twice. He beat his chest, cracked stone with his fists, threw a chunk of basalt into the air, and smashed it mid-flight with a roar. Theatrics. Ritual. Intimidation. Harper still didn't move. To the untrained eye, it looked like incompetence. Fear, even. But the Terran officers stationed behind the cliff face were silent, reverent, watching their general with a kind of stillness, one reserved for sacred things. They didn't look worried. They looked like they were watching a storm build. A voice crackled through the alien comms. "Has he frozen? Do humans experience sudden paralysis?" Another responded, "This is either a strategy or madness. Possibly both." At 17 minutes, Clorg lunged forward with a burst of motion. He stopped short, slamming both fists into the dirt just feet from Harper. The earth buckled, steam hissed up. A classic Voraki feint, meant to provoke instinctive recoil. Harper blinked once. That was all. And then came the pacing. Clorg circled him like a starved wolf, foam flecking the edges of his snarling lips. He bellowed again, this time close enough to shake Harper's hair with the force of it. Still, Harper didn't move. He wasn't meditating. He wasn't praying. His eyes flicked, once toward the ridge of boulders in the northeast, once toward a patch of disturbed soil in the south, and once to the beast's left knee, which bore a thin scar running lateral across the joint. Time passed. The aliens watching began to squirm. "This is dishonor," hissed one. "A mockery of tradition." "This is terrifying," said another softly. "He's learning." At the 30-minute mark, Clorg could take no more. He roared in fury and launched forward in a full charge, claws extended, mouth gaping wide. A blur of rage and momentum. Harper waited, and then stepped aside. One move. One clean sidestep. Clorg crashed into the obsidian wall behind him, stone fracturing under the impact. He turned with a snarl, only to find Harper standing exactly where he had been, calm, centered, relaxed. "Done posturing?" Harper asked, voice dry as sun-scorched iron. The silence that followed was global. From space, alien generals leaned forward. One of them whispered, "He speaks." Clorg growled low, shaking his head. "You mock me, Deathworlder?" "No," Harper said, with a slow, unbothered breath. "I study you." He took 2 steps forward, eyes never leaving Clorg's face. "I've watched 1,000 battles like this. You're not here to fight. You're here to perform. You want blood with an audience. I'm here to end a war." The Varaki general snarled, but there was hesitation now. A twitch. A doubt. Harper's eyes softened, and he said gently, "You're good at what you were made for, son. But the galaxy made a mistake. It measured humans by our size, our tech, our treaties. You looked at our kindness and saw weakness." Clorg's muscles bunched. He charged again. This time, Harper ducked low, palms skimming the dirt, grabbed a shard of shattered stone, and flicked it with such speed it embedded into Clorg's upper thigh. The beast howled. Another charge. Harper rolled away. Light on his feet, fluid, human. No enhancements. No magic tech. Just evolved precision. The fight was no longer a spectacle. It was a lesson. From the ridge, Terran Captain Emilia Dross whispered, "He's dissecting him." Every movement Harper made now was efficient. Nothing wasted. He tapped the field with his heel, noting how the vibrations echoed. He stepped across shadows carefully, measuring footing. He didn't look like a soldier. He looked like a tracker. A predator in civilian clothes. Clorg roared again. Slashed again. But he was missing more. Bleeding more. His left leg was dragging. Harper stopped. "Pain's catching up, isn't it?" he said softly. "That's how it starts. Little things. A weak step. A slower breath. That's how humans win. Not all at once, but all over." Clorg bared his teeth. "You hide behind words." "No," Harper replied. "I stand behind history. Our kind grew up on a death world too. Only difference is, we didn't make ours safer. We made ourselves meaner." There was a pause. Wind howled through the crags. Sulfur hissed. Somewhere far off, a predator called. And then Harper, slow as sunrise, reached into his coat and pulled out a metal toothpick. He rolled it between his fingers once, then slid it into the corner of his mouth. The alien commentators were panicking now. This wasn't how death duels were supposed to go. "Someone stop this. This isn't a fight, it's a reckoning. He's killing the idea of the Varaki, not the body." Clorg lunged one final time, and Harper caught him, not with a blow, but with a shoulder turn and a twist, redirecting his own momentum into the obsidian ground. Clorg collapsed, and Harper didn't finish him. He simply knelt and looked him in the eye. "You ever wonder," Harper said, voice low, "why humanity got so good at killing things bigger than us?" Clorg wheezed, blood bubbling from his side. He tried to speak, but Harper only patted his arm gently. "We never wanted the crown. We just hated being hunted." He stood. Above, in every warship, the silence stretched out. And then Harper looked up, straight into the orbital cams. His smile was small, dangerous, almost polite. "Earth accepts the terms of surrender," he said. "You'll find our proposal uploaded to your flagship mainframes. It was sent 29 minutes ago." Behind him, Vorik 9's dual ground cracked, split by the final charge's seismic echo. But Harper was already walking away. Calm. Steady. The war was over before most realized it had started. And the last thing the galaxy saw before the feed cut was a human general, hands in his coat pockets, humming something soft and low. Possibly a tune. Possibly a warning. He didn't look back. 31 minutes before Harper stepped onto the field on Vorik 9, a war room deep beneath the Terran embassy had fallen so quiet you could hear the hum of a diplomatic coffee machine. It hadn't been touched in hours. No one had the appetite. General Emilia Dross, second in command to Harper, stood over the projection table with arms crossed, watching the data stream scroll, biosignatures, satellite uplinks, terrain heat maps, alien rituals translated into blunt soldier's English. Her eyes flicked to the countdown. 30 minutes until deployment. And still no damn weapons request from Harper. Colonel Ortiz chuckled behind her. You think he wants us to airdrop him a fresh pair of boots and a poetry book instead? I think he's planning something, she muttered, not looking up. And I'm not sure even he knows what it is yet. Harper hadn't been selected for this duel. He'd volunteered, which in the Terran military meant he'd said, I'll do it, and then left the room before anyone could argue. The Veraki had demanded ritual combat to settle territorial claims on 6 border systems. One-on-one by their sacred code. No plasma. No fleets. Just champion versus champion. A crude show of dominance. Humanity, new to galactic politics, but not to war, had agreed. They'd played along. Smiled. Nodded. Signed papers with ink that encoded surveillance dust. What the galaxy didn't realize was that Harper hadn't gone down to fight. He'd gone down to listen, to watch, to understand. Every second he stood still on that jagged field had been a data-gathering act of surgical observation. Every muscle twitch of the Veraki general had been filed away. Every shift of weight, every roar, every claw pattern etched in Harper's mental map. Because humanity hadn't risen from Earth's blood-soaked soil by charging first. They'd survived by waiting, by watching the lion tire, by letting the bear grow hungry, by tracking wolves for days in snow so cold it made teeth crack. The humans who walked quietly were always the ones to fear. From the balcony above the field, the Veraki delegates had grown restless. They began to spit curses. Honorless, they said. Cowards. Meat things who used politeness like a shield. One diplomat even demanded Harper be disqualified for refusing to engage. But Klorg knew better now. He'd tried everything. Feints. Charges. Ranged intimidation. None of it worked. The human didn't respond like prey. He didn't respond like predator, either. He responded like nothing they'd ever seen. And that unsettled Klorg in a place no scar reached. Harper, 35 minutes in now, shifted his stance ever so slightly. And when he did, Klorg noticed something new. A smile. Not smug. Not cruel. Almost curious. It was the same kind of smile scientists wore when an experiment started doing something it wasn't supposed to. In the Terran war room, Dross leaned forward. Bring up Veraki musculature mapping again, she said. The screen shifted. He's found the weakness, hasn't he? Ortiz nodded. That scar on Klorg's knee, defensive mutation, didn't finish during adolescence. It's a blind spot. And he's bleeding it, she muttered, without throwing a punch. They watched as Harper stepped forward now. 1 foot. Measured. Then another. Klorg flinched. Dross blinked. That's it, Ortiz said softly. Fear reflex initiated. Harper spoke then, voice soft through the field mic, broadcast across half a dozen fleets watching the duel. You know, back on Earth, we had an animal like you. Big. Loud. Sharp claws. Dominated everything. Until it ran into a little guy with a rock. He paused. Guess who's still around? The words echoed through the silent warships. Ambassadors from the Siraxi, the Till, the Ordari, all of whom had dismissed humanity as enthusiastic toddlers with guns, now watched with sudden interest. Is that how they fight? Till asked in a whisper. No, his aide responded. That's how they win. Back on the field, Harper circled once. He didn't need speed. He didn't need tech. He used Klorg's own motion against him, redirecting. Watching the center of gravity, the unarmored joints, the slight twitch before a leap. He wasn't reacting. He was predicting. The Veraki general, bred to tear tanks in half, found himself missing. Again and again. Harper dropped low, dug his boot into a shallow groove he'd seen earlier, created by Klorg's own charge. When Klorg lunged, Harper let him trip into it. Klorg hit hard. Harper said nothing. He didn't gloat. He didn't posture. He let silence speak. It unnerved everyone. Aliens didn't understand silence. Their power came from ritual, Chants, displays, declarations. Strength wasn't strength unless it shouted. But the human just stood there, like a tree with its roots deep in battlefield soil, saying without words, "You move, you die. I move, you fall." Dross tapped her console. "Begin playback, timestamp 6 minutes in," she ordered. A side screen appeared. It showed Harper blinking, once, while watching a gust lift Clorg's fur. "Wind direction," Ortiz murmured. "He's been mapping terrain flow since minute 6. They switched views. Harper's boots scuffed a specific section of Earth while evading. The thermal map revealed it was slightly hollow beneath. "A sink pocket," Dross breathed. He cataloged weaknesses in the terrain before the beast even charged. Back on the field, Harper leaned slightly to his left. Clorg mirrored him unconsciously. A setup. Another lunge. Harper dropped. Clorg's foot slid into the sulfur vent Harper had uncovered 5 minutes earlier. The vent burst, sending a hiss of burning gas into Clorg's flank. The beast howled, skin blistering. Still, Harper didn't capitalize. He let pain and fear do their work. Clorg was learning a lesson humanity had taught predators for millennia. The longer we wait, the sharper our knives get. Up in the ships, a quiet realization spread like a virus. This wasn't about ritual. This was warfare. And Harper wasn't just fighting Clorg. He was demonstrating. He was giving the galaxy a show. A warning. One Veraki, one knife, one field. And behind it, 10,000 hours of Terran strategy. The kind of war humanity never wanted to fight, but knew how to win. With a whisper. With a glance. With 30 minutes of silence, so precise it became its own form of violence. On the edge of the viewing cliff, a young alien tactician clutched his notepad. "This isn't instinct," he said. "This is learned." His superior turned slowly. "What do you mean?" "I mean," the youth whispered, "he studied. He learned our tactics, our patterns, our terrain. This fight started long before he walked on that field. We just didn't notice." From beneath his coat, Harper withdrew something small, a silver band worn on his wrist. A simple tracking device. Non-lethal, non-broadcasting. But anyone watching from orbit who knew Terran codes would recognize the shape. It meant, Phase 1 complete. Dross leaned forward again. "Begin Phase 2 uplink." Ortiz blinked. "You think he's ready?" "He's not fighting anymore," she said. "He's teaching." Harper approached Clorg now, not as a predator to finish prey, but as a man explaining history to a child. "You thought humans were soft," he said, voice steady. "Because we wear fabric. Because we talk slow. Because we love peace." He crouched beside the heaving beast. "But you never asked how many wars we buried before we ever looked at the stars." Clorg's lips peeled back. Not in defiance. In understanding. A new fear. Harper stood, dusted off his coat. "You've seen one of us," he said, turning his back. "Imagine if we got serious." And with that, he walked away. Not fast. Not triumphant. Like a man who had nothing left to prove. Above him, the comms pinged with new updates. Systems quietly taken over, translation networks inverted. Fleet AI compromised by backdoors planted months ago in peace treaties no one had read thoroughly enough. Harper was not a soldier. He was a keystone. The tip of a human spear they hadn't realized was being thrown until it was halfway through the air. And by the time the Galactic powers understood the shape of the weapon, it was already too late to duck. In the silence that followed, one alien admiral whispered, voice trembling. He didn't win the duel. Another nodded slowly. He won the galaxy's fear. Clorg's breathing had gone ragged. Not from pain. He'd endured pain since the day he was born in a cloning vat with his jaw fused shut from overgrown bone plating. But from a new, colder feeling. Something that had no ritual name in Voraki culture. Something that throbbed in his wounded leg and pounded behind his eyes with every missed strike. Doubt. It wasn't supposed to happen. Not here. Not to him. The humans had accepted the duel as if it were theater, sent a man in worn boots and wrinkled cloth instead of a real soldier, and then simply watched. Stood there like an insult wrapped in patience. But now Clorg limped. Now Harper moved. And the movements were small, lethal, calculated. Everything the Viraki prized, ferocity, strength, the glory of the charge, meant nothing to the man who never ran. Harper circled with the gait of a hunter who'd already chosen the spot where his opponent would die. The Terran general's knife flashed out at last, not with ceremony, not with rage, but with clinical silence. A flat-edged tool of ceramic white, designed for no other purpose than slipping between alien ribs. Clorg blocked the first strike, barely. The second grazed his flank, but it wasn't deep. The third strike didn't come. Instead, Harper stepped away again, leaving Clorg striking at ghosts. The galaxy had come expecting a monster. They got a man. And that's why they lost. From the decks above, alien delegates leaned forward against glass panes, watching as Harper ducked beneath another sweeping claw with almost casual grace. He didn't rush. He didn't breathe hard. He whispered something, but the mics didn't catch it. Those who had spent decades labeling humans as a developing military civilization were now rewriting their own internal risk assessments. Fast. Back on the field, Clorg made a last-ditch attempt at a tackle. It was desperate, weight first, powered by a lifetime of never needing to think in a fight. Harper sidestepped and brought the back of his hand across the beast's exposed neck, not to hurt, but to unbalance. Clorg toppled forward, caught himself with one knee. Blood dripped in slow beats onto the black earth. Harper crouched a few meters away and tapped 2 fingers on the ground. 3 things about this place, he said conversationally, as though he were giving a lecture in some war college. 1. The wind always shifts 5 degrees west after a sulfur gust. 2. The terrain slopes in a shallow arc that favors left-handed fighters. And 3. He flicked a pebble forward with his finger. It bounced twice. You always leave a crater when you fall. Clorg didn't understand the words, but he understood tone. The tone of a man who had finished the math. Above, General Amelia Dross stood in a sealed Terran command module, eyes fixed on the data. Biomonitors showed Harper's heart rate unchanged. Respiration steady. Not even adrenaline spiked. He wasn't in a fight. He was in control. Ortiz muttered, "He's stalling again. What's he waiting for?" Dross didn't answer. She watched Harper twist his wrist slowly, letting the knife catch a glint of alien sunlight. No flourish. No intimidation. Just a signal. Harper moved forward, and the duel changed. No more evasions. No more pauses. He struck. Once, across Clorg's dominant hand. The ceramic blade sliced tendon, not bone. Deliberate. Twice, along the creature's exposed side, where armor plates thinned near the lung. A shallow cut. Enough to sap breath. Third, he kicked the inner knee. The leg buckled. Clorg roared. But even the roar lacked thunder now. It was breathless, fading. Harper stepped back again, calm, and said, "It's not personal. This is what we do. We don't rush. We don't outmuscle. We outlast." Clorg swung again with one remaining claw. Harper dropped low, shifted his weight to the left, twisted his elbow against Clorg's strike arm, and used the creature's own momentum to flip him onto his back. The ground shook. Dust rose. There was a silence like the moments before rain. On every orbital ship, alien analysts now scrambled to erase decades of peaceful human labels. Diplomats clutched tablets. Commanders exchanged nervous glances. Humanity was not a curious species of durable bipeds. Humanity was worse. They were patient. Clorg tried to rise again, one arm trembling, but Harper placed a boot lightly on his wrist, not enough to crush, just enough to remind. "No shame in the loss," Harper said gently. "You played your role. Your species built you to brawl, to perform, to roar. You're good at it." He crouched beside the beast general's heaving form. But humans weren't built. We built ourselves. And we did it while surviving things that didn't leave fossils. Clorg closed his eyes. He didn't understand the Terran tongue, but he recognized the cadence. Defeat was being delivered like a eulogy. Above them, the watching fleets grew still. On the Soroxi vessel, their war priest leaned over to his commander. "This is how Earth teaches. Not in academies. On blood-soaked ground." The commander swallowed dryly. "Then we've misread the humans." "No," said the priest. "We've barely read them." Back on the field, Harper finally stood, stretching slightly, knife now held in reverse grip. But he didn't strike the killing blow. Instead, he glanced up to the sky. His lips moved, barely audible. A Terran orbiting relay pinged open a command channel. Harper's message was a single line: "Execute contingency Omega." From the Varaki observation ship, alarms began to ring. A moment later, their internal comms went dead. "System failure," someone screamed. "No. Internal override." Across 5 ships, the same pattern repeated. Command relays hijacked, weapon arrays paralyzed, navigational systems trapped in feedback loops. The duel was a distraction. The knife was never the threat. Harper was. Captain Dross, watching from her terminal, let out a slow breath. So that's what he was waiting for. Ortiz's eyes were wide. He planned this from the moment he stepped off the lander. "No," Dross said, eyes locked on the screen. From before that, Harper walked slowly now, past Klorg's prone form, into the center of the field. A mic picked up his next words, and across the system, they were broadcast to every military channel still listening. "I want to be clear," he said, as gently as if reading a bedtime story. "We didn't come here for war. We came here for respect." He turned slowly in place, addressing all directions. "We offered peace. You called it weakness. You tested us with rituals. We answered in kind." A flash in the sky. 3 Varaki ships shut down simultaneously, spinning helpless in low orbit. "And now," Harper said, tone still level, "we're going to teach you what respect costs." Klorg watched from where he lay on the ground. Not hatred in his eyes anymore. Just comprehension. Perhaps, somewhere deep in his genetic heritage, a warning had always lingered, quiet, ignored. A myth of prey that learned to fight back. A species with soft eyes and slow words who smiled too often, too wide. A species who studied. A species who waited. Harper glanced once at the distant ships above. The duel was over. But the war hadn't even started. It would begin not with invasions or fleets, but with systems slowly failing, treaties unraveling, allies defecting, ghost data corrupting archives. All triggered by one man on a field who stood still for 30 minutes, then moved exactly when it mattered. And when it was done, the galaxy would remember the lesson. The Varaki sent a beast. Earth sent a man. And that made all the difference. In the vacuum of space, silence should have reigned. But silence had been replaced by static. Then static gave way to confusion. Half-broken comms, security protocols spiraling into error messages. Fleet AIs flickering between standby and panic. Orbiting above Vorik 9, 6 capital vessels belonging to the coalition of hierarchies blinked their running lights in confused rhythms, unaware that they were no longer in control of their own systems. On board the Varaki flagship Ultharn Dreadfire, Admiral Vakare gripped the side of the command dais, breathing smoke. "Reboot tactical. Pull us from orbit. Someone give me a functional report, now." "There's nothing to reboot," hissed the second officer. His voice quivered. "Command matrices have been overwritten. Defensive turrets are offline. Comms stuck on broadcast loop. We're sending internal data to everyone." "To who?" "To the entire quadrant." "What data?" The officer swallowed. "Fleet vulnerabilities. Command codes. Weapon blueprints." A pause. Then, the realization. The world seemed to tilt. It wasn't a duel. It had never been a duel. They'd let the human onto the planet's surface. They'd given him an audience. They'd given him time. And he had used it all. Below, Harper stood in the center of the battlefield, coat dusty, expression unreadable. Behind him, the battered form of Klorg still writhed, trying to crawl away, not out of pride, but out of the primal, biological drive to survive. The creature understood now. So did the galaxy. They'd been watching a knife fight, and missed the moment the man planted a bomb under their empire. The sky shimmered, and from the edges of Vorik 9's exosphere, Earth's fleet decloaked. One by one, vessels emerged, sleek, dark, built not with brutal bulk, but with the elegance of predators. Compact, efficient, loaded with stealth tech and enough cyber warfare tools to make old empires tremble. There were no flags, no booming declarations, just a silent arrival, a reveal, the quiet threat of preparedness. General Amelia Dross stood at the helm of the TNS Herald of Grief, arms crossed. She watched as lines of code flooded her main screen, encrypted transmissions from Harper's field wristband, unlocking final stage protocols. "We're live," the AI intoned. "Target fleets are now under soft lock. Suggest limited demonstrations of kinetic force." Dross shook her head. "No, they already lost. Let them sit in it." She opened a wideband channel and transmitted a message laced with perfect calm. "To all fleets observing, Earth is not here to conquer. We are here to conclude. Please stand by for terms." It wasn't a threat. That made it worse. On a dozen command bridges, alien captains turned from their screens with ashen faces. Systems still glitched. Engines remained under override. Communications were a chaos of echoes and redirections. Some tried to call for help. Most realized the futility. All of it had started with a man in a worn-out coat who didn't draw a weapon for 30 minutes. Harper stood alone on the battlefield, dust swirling around his boots. He raised his head and spoke once more. "You taught us that ritual matters more than results. That roaring louder made your empire safer. That strength was measured in scars." He looked down at Klorg. "We learned to survive by being quiet, not because we lacked power, but because we valued it." The alien general groaned. Harper didn't offer a hand. Mercy had never been part of the duel, but neither was cruelty. What Harper offered was worse. A lesson. Harper stepped away from him, eyes flicking upward toward the Veraki fleet, then to the orbital cameras still broadcasting. "Your ships are still intact," he said. "Your people still breathing. That was the choice we made, not the outcome we had to allow." His voice stayed calm, but there was gravity beneath the words now, a weight that pulled attention like a star pulls planets. "You lost because you assumed we wanted to win like you do. That we'd match brute with brute, blade with blade. You don't understand humans yet." He paused, tilting his head. "We don't fight for pride. We fight because we remember what happens when we don't." Up in the fleets, some began to panic again. Others simply sat down, watching, processing. Aboard the Carew observation vessel, High Chancellor Virus exhaled. Her crest wilted in resignation. "They didn't just prepare for this fight," she murmured. "They invited it, drew the blade across their own skin just to see who'd come sniffing." Her aide stood beside her, frozen. "Contact Earth," Virus said softly. "Ask them for terms." "But—" "Ask them," she repeated. "Before they decide, they want more than just this." On the Terran flagship, Dross smiled faintly. "First requests are coming in." Ortiz leaned over her shoulder. "You think Harper'll let us celebrate?" Dross raised a brow. "He just tore down half the galaxy without firing a shot. Let the man have his quiet moment first." On Vorak 9, Harper stepped to the edge of the dueling ring. Around him, no applause came. No cheers. Just the wind, laced with ash and sulfur. He looked at the ground one last time, as if remembering the footsteps that had brought him here. Then he turned and walked away. The feed followed him for another 10 seconds. Then cut. Across the galaxy, a phrase began to take root, not in official records, not in military reports, but in whispered halls, in drinking dens, in backroom alliances shaken loose by fear. The duel was a decoy. Some added the rest. The war just started. But the wiser ones said nothing at all, because Earth hadn't declared war. They had shown what it would look like, and made the galaxy beg for peace.